to say a few things about mentoring. Mentoring is the baseline of orphan care in many ways. It's the on-ramp for so many people, church people, to engage this orphan crisis, the fatherless crisis. A lot of times at the Mentoring Project, we say something. We say, mentors win by showing up. And we believe that. We believe that the way to reach this generation is through an incarnational, generational, relational approach where we are with them. And that's kind of a big difference because I'm standing on a stage right now and it's easy to kind of lead from a stage. And I heard someone earlier saying, lob things from a stage. But just a few hundred miles east of here is a little town called Ferguson. And you look at that situation and it's an urgent situation. There's a crisis there. 2 people have lost their lives and it could even turn worse, and we pray that it doesn't. But one of the best stories coming out of Ferguson, the story that I've been following very closely, is when the governor tapped a man on the shoulder and he said, "Why don't you go and why don't you lead them?" And this was a local man. He's a captain. And he knew the people, he knew the place, and he began to lead not from the stage, but from the streets. And there's a huge difference in that. And so he didn't broadcast, he wasn't writing blogs about the crisis, and all these things are important, but he was leading from the streets. He began to protect the crowd's right to protest. He said, as long as you do it legally. He marched with them. He handed out water for them. He began to serve them. He made all the police officers take off their masks and all their scary things. And now there's been some unrest. I'm not saying it's been perfect, but he's trying to lead from the streets. And I'd like to say to you as orphan advocates and mentor advocates that you are the ones who will lead from the streets. And why that's so important is this. As we look at our age of these great churches that we've seen, and even some great pastors, we're seeing an increase of skepticism toward that approach, toward the leading from the stage. There's more skepticism, there's more doubt, there's less efficacy in this regard. But as you see people leading from the streets, from beside, from with, from showing up, incarnationally, the way that Christ showed up in our world, as you see that, and that's what we call mentoring, it's relational. As you see people do that, guess what? Their voice is loud. Their roar is loud. And they might mock you, they might dismiss you, but they cannot deny who you are, relationally and incarnationally, as you show up and as you lead from the streets. I think in the coming years, as the skepticism grows, and I'm just going to go on a limb here, and you might disagree, and that's fine, but I think as the skepticism towards the church as an institution grows, the leading from the stage will become less effective, less and less effective. And the real leaders will gather around 1, 2, 3, 12, and they will walk with them. And they'll teach them things. They'll teach them to pray. They'll mentor them. And that's our call, according to the Great Commission and according to Christ, to walk with. That's it. And in that way, we model this same idea that God says to us this beautiful promise of the Scriptures, the promise of the presence. I am with you. When we show up for a generation in the same way that Christ shows up for us, we say, I am with you. And I want you to get something here, everyone in this room and everyone watching, that you are a leader from the streets. And what that means is that your voice is potentially louder than the voice from the stages, even though people don't know it. Even though you may be nameless and faceless, you don't have a New York Times best-selling book, you don't have a big blog, you don't have a TV show, maybe you don't have a flashy smile, and you don't have all this stuff that all the people from the stage have, but you have a louder voice. Because you're walking incarnationally with courage, you're showing up. We think in this conversation, this orphan care conversation, that mentoring is huge because it's an on-ramp. But even more than just this conversation, we believe, and I believe, that this is the way forward for the church. Not from the stage, but from the streets. And you are leaders from the streets. And it takes courage for a leader to step off the stage, step off a platform, and to step into a mission incarnationally and invite people to do the same thing. And so I just want to call you and challenge you that the leaders of the next generation of the church will not necessarily be the big voices, Those are important, and there's an office of preaching and teaching, and we need the evangelistic and the evangelical and all the different types of voices coming that says Jesus is Lord and you should follow him. We need all of that. We need the Billy Grahams, right? We need men like Billy Graham and women like Billy Graham. But we need people who are leading from the streets. When you lead from the street, you earn the right to be heard. And you, like this police officer in Ferguson, make real change and transformational change. A few months ago, I received a comment on my Facebook wall. I was doing the Facebook thing, checking like any good person, checking my Facebook. I was on vacation. Great time to check Facebook. That's sarcasm. And I was checking my Facebook. And on my Facebook wall, there was a comment from a kid that I used to mentor. And he was a part of the Misfits. And we had a group of kids that we called the Misfits, and they would come over to our house, and it was me and another mentor and about 5 of them. And they were the kids that were a little bit off, which I fit right in. And so they had trench coats in July. They had the long floppy hair. They were the skaters, and they were a little bit, you could tell they were different. And so we mentored these kids and called them the Misfits. And that was 15 years ago. And we mentored them. We stayed in touch. That's one good thing that something like social media is good for. But on this day, on my Facebook wall, it said, this guy who is one of the Misfits, who's now older, posted on his wall, his Facebook wall, this statement: "This will not make me popular. I'm sorry. A lot of you are going to be mad at me for this, but I got to go." And that was on his Facebook wall. And if you know him and you know what he was actually saying was he was going to end his life. And all of a sudden on his Facebook wall, all of these comments were popping up saying, no, don't do it. And just like instantly you just see these people clicking, don't do it, don't do it. And I was on vacation and I said, man, he just told the world he's ending his life. And because I know him, I know that he means it. I know he wouldn't say that unless he is about to do that. And so I just instantly wrote something on his Facebook wall like everyone else, and then I started emailing him. And I said, this is why you mean a lot to me. When I was mentoring you, I lost my job because I had a disagreement with a guy, and you welcomed me, and you told me that I was a misfit. And he had this real deep voice, and he said, you're one of us now. I said, you told me that I was a misfit. And you welcomed me. You didn't know that, but you loved me in that situation. And I hit send on the message thing. You know how Facebook it says delivered, and then right underneath the message it says read? And it said read. So I was like, well, he read it. Well, and he wasn't responding to anything, so I sent another one. And now I'm married, and these are my kids' names. I have one named Sahara and one named Hadassah, and they're awesome, and you would love them. And Hadassah's really creative like you, and she would love the video games that you make. And boom, hit send. A minute later, read. So he's reading these emails that I'm sending him on Facebook. So I just do it again and again for about an hour. I'm just sending, and we need to come make knives sometimes. I make knives, and I'm terrible at it, but it's fun. And I know he likes that stuff. Hey, you need to come to my house, and we should make some knives. Read. He's reading. And stay alive, because you have a bright future, and you have a brilliant mind, and people love you, and your story is not supposed to end today. Read. A few more emails, and it stopped reading. And then his best friend got on and said, Matt is safe. He's with the police. They came in and got him. And a few months later, he got out. He got out of the detention, of the detain system. And he wrote me this long email back. And it was beautiful, because those moments that I was with Matt, hanging out with him in his life, I didn't get to speak into the core of his being. I had a right to be heard, but I never had an opportunity. 15 years later, God just opened this door, and I don't know why I opened up my Facebook. I wasn't being a very good vacationer, but I had an opportunity to speak into his life. When you lead from the streets, as mentors, as incarnational leaders, as foster care people and adoption people, you are leading in a way that earns the right to be heard in a world that doesn't want to hear. And so I'm calling you, and encouraging you and hope that you see your role in society, that you are the next generation of leaders. And that's fine to be nameless and faceless. It doesn't matter. And so I just want to close with that idea. Instead of worrying so much about telling your story, broadcasting, all this is very important. But continue to lead from the streets with passion, with courage, with humility. And in so doing, the world will find your promise of the presence, your I am with you, as something that they just can't ignore. Thank you so much.